Okay. It's 9 o'clock, so I will go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us this morning for substantial damage estimator overview. And so this does tie in a lot to our post-flood responsibility stuff. And today we're going to be focusing more on doing the actual estimations, what to look out for, and then the different features that are in the software. And so, in this background picture is actually Chapman in 2008 when a tornado went right through the floodplain. So they did use it in that case. Um, and so I appreciate all of you who participated in the survey that I sent out last week. I will send out another survey after the class. If you could just provide us some feedback on how we can improve, we would appreciate that. And then if you do want credit, I need you to participate in the 2 poll questions that we'll have about halfway through and then at the end. So just putting that out there, I do need you to at least answer the questions if you want credit, which is 2 CECs. So today we'll be looking a little bit at the background of the software, just kind of the general features that are in there. Of course, when and where we need to perform damage estimations using the software. So I'll walk you through what putting an assessment looks like, and then a little bit about resolving conflicts with community or property owners that may not agree with your estimation. And the software will help you streamline that, and you can generate reports where you can look at everything. And we'll go through that. So FEMA has put together a video on the SDE software that I wanted to show you guys, just because it kind of gives that whole broad overview. So I will play that, and then we'll continue on with the presentation.
A disaster can result from a flood, hurricane, earthquake, tornado, and major fire, or as a result of other natural hazard or human-caused events. In addition to causing injury and death, disasters can also cause extensive damage to infrastructure, buildings, and other property. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, encourages those affected by disasters to reduce the risk to life and property posed by future disasters by implementing mitigation. Examples include elevating chronically flood-damaged homes or relocating them away from flood hazard areas, retrofitting buildings to make them resistant to earthquakes or strong winds, and encouraging communities to adopt and enforce disaster-resistant codes and standards for development and reconstruction. Communities that participate in FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP, agree to adopt and enforce minimum standards that help prevent future damages. Under NFIP minimum standards, if a structure located in a Special Flood Hazard Area, or SFHA, sustains substantial damage from any cause, that structure must be brought into compliance with the community's floodplain management requirements for new construction or be removed from the floodplain. These requirements must be enforced by local officials and adhered to by property owners. NFIP minimum building standards can also be found in the international codes. The International Building Code and International Residential Code contain flood-resistant design and construction provisions that are consistent with the NFIP for all buildings and structures.
When communities choose to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, they agree to adopt and enforce a local floodplain management ordinance. And in return, the National Flood Insurance Program makes flood insurance available within the community. There are currently about 20,000 communities that are participating in the National Flood Insurance Program. And flood insurance is designed as an alternative to disaster assistance to combat the rising costs that are associated with disaster assistance. And it's designed to reduce risk to future new construction, repair substantial damage, and a substantial improvement to structures.
One provision of floodplain management ordinances is the substantial damage, substantial improvement requirement. It is important to note the substantial damage provision applies to damage of a structure from any origin. In a post-disaster environment, damaged structures must be evaluated to determine if they have been substantially damaged. if the cost necessary to fully repair the structure to its pre-damage condition is equal to or greater than 50% of the structure's market value before damages, then it is considered to be substantially damaged. Some communities have adopted a lower substantial damage threshold in their floodplain management regulations. In addition, some communities track damages cumulatively over a period of time. It is important to know a community's specific substantial damage requirements in order to conduct substantial damage determinations. Like floodplain management ordinances, building codes also have triggers that require existing construction to be renovated or rebuilt to current codes when certain work is performed. When assessing damage and necessary repairs, it is important to know whether repairs and rebuilding efforts may be impacted by a community's current building code. Some triggers in the code may permit partial repairs of building components or systems, while other code requirements may state that a partial repair is not permitted and a building component may need to be fully replaced. This ratio shows how the repair or improvement percentage is determined. Substantial damage is calculated based on the cost to repair the damage, while substantial improvement is based on improvements costs.
Once you have an accurate cost to repair, that's the numerator in the calculation you're going to make. You're going to take that cost of repair as the numerator and the market value of the structure as the denominator. When you divide the two, you can come up with a percentage for substantial damage.
Per minimum NFIP requirements for substantial damage or improvement, when a local official determines that a structure is substantially damaged or that substantial improvements will occur, the following provisions apply to that structure. A. If the structure is a residence, the lowest floor must be elevated to or above the base flood elevation, or BFE, which is the elevation above sea level or other datum of the 1% annual chance or 100-year flood. B. If it's a non-residential structure, the lowest floor must be elevated to or above the BFE, or the structure must be dry flood-proofed so that it is watertight below the BFE and is able to resist hydrostatic and hydrodynamic loads and the effects of buoyancy. Following a disaster, local officials will often have many additional duties to perform.
Well, after a disaster, the local official, whether that's the floodplain manager or building official, is going to have a lot of extra work to do, and that can be a very difficult time for them, especially when they may be facing damages to their own home, and yet they have to go out and complete all these substantial damage inspections before any permits can be issued to repair or improve property. Local officials need to perform substantial damage determinations anytime a structure is damaged within the regulatory floodplain. This is especially important after a disaster when large numbers of buildings are going to be damaged.
If FEMA or the NFIP State Coordinator's Office determines that the community is not in compliance with the substantial damage provision, penalties may result.
A penalty of probation is usually the first disciplinary action taken and results in an annual surcharge on all flood insurance policies within the given community. Suspension is a more serious penalty given after a probation period has failed to resolve a non-compliance issue. When a community is put on suspension, flood insurance is no longer available within that community. Also, certain federal grant funds and disaster assistance may cease to be available for properties in identified SFHAs. In addition to protecting citizens from the devastating effects of flooding and working towards reducing flood losses in the community, these penalties are significant examples of why it is so important to perform substantial damage determinations. For property owners with active flood insurance policies, there is coverage available to facilitate bringing substantially damaged buildings into compliance.
If property is substantially damaged by flood, increased cost of compliance coverage is available. An increased cost of compliance coverage is an additional amount of coverage that's available under every National Flood Insurance Program policy.
ICC funds offer up to $30,000 to NFIP policyholders to bring structures into compliance, provided a local official has determined that the structure has been substantially damaged as a result of flooding.
Increased costs of compliance funds are used by property owners to bring their flood-prone properties into compliance with local floodplain development regulations. In order to do this, projects often include structure elevation.
This house has actually been lifted to 10 feet from its original level of 36 inches, brings it up out of the floodplain from its original base flood elevation of 5 feet, and now is in compliance at 11 feet. The biggest benefit to the elevating is the actual discount that they're receiving, the reduction in their flood insurance. We have customers that have stated their previous policies were $1,400 and $1,500 a year for their flood premium, and after the elevation process, they've actually had their insurance premiums drop down to less than $400, between $300 and $400 on the same premium.
The SDE is a tool that FEMA has developed to assist communities determining substantial damage equally and fairly across the board.
So it is not only used for flooding events, it's used for wind, tornadoes, and fire. So you have a great asset in your hand.
To assist communities, FEMA has developed the Substantial Damage Estimator Software, or SDE software. SDE provides documentation of a substantial damage evaluation via a FEMA-accepted tool. While the use of SDE by communities is not mandatory, there are advantages to using it. SDE data can be saved and recalled later during NFIP compliance visits. The SDE package includes the SDE software on CD, the field workbook, a user's manual, and desk reference to assist local officials with their substantial damage determinations. SDE damage inspection worksheets are provided for residential structures as well as non-residential structures. These worksheets list information that local officials should obtain when inspecting a building to determine the extent of damage. FEMA's SDE is a tool for local officials that provides a consistent, efficient approach to conducting substantial damage estimations. The functions and features of the software include capability to determine residential and non-residential structure damage, structure attributes to adjust element percentages, user-created fields capability, square footage determination tool, search function to sort records, import feature for community property data, which can be used to create property records prior to doing assessments, pre-event, file upload function to attach photos and documents, import-export tool, assignments feature for use by supervisors or coordinators with inspectors, mapping tool for use with shareware to display files in several freely available mapping applications.
It's best used in a medium or a large disaster, but it still can be used on a 1 or 2 house basis. Substantial damage must be determined if there is damage in the floodplain of any structures.
The Substantial Damage Estimator is designed as a simplified, easy approach for local officials, especially when they're faced with large numbers of damaged properties. It's a consistent and verifiable method for performing these inspections, and it's also something that provides you with a printout that makes it easy to explain to property owners and other folks who need to get this information.
After the Hurricane Ike, we had tremendous flooding on the island. Even our X zones were underwater. Everything was chaos. We had to scramble and try to get our assessment teams together and do damage assessments throughout the entire island. We used the SDE program to help us get our citizens back on track, permitting, our businesses back in order and open.
Once field inspections have been performed and the damage inspection worksheet has been completed, the information can be entered into the SDE software. The user's manual provides information on using the SDE software, including how to enter data and what information is needed to complete the damage determination. The desk reference provides guidance on implementing the substantial damage, substantial improvement provision when buildings are being improved or have been damaged. The SDE software requires a replacement value to determine the approximate costs to repair damage to the structure, the numerator in the substantial damage ratio. Although the SDE software is available to all local officials, it is not the only means of determining substantial damage. Other methods include repair estimates from qualified contractors or local building officials. Such estimates represent the numerator of the substantial damage ratio. Although use of the SDE software is not required, should you use an alternate methodology for substantial damage determination, the SDE software does allow you to input data from these alternate sources. The SDE applies a depreciation based on the structure's age to the replacement value to calculate a default for market value. This represents the denominator of the substantial damage ratio. Alternatives to this approach include using a professional appraisal or a tax assessment value that is properly adjusted to reflect market value.
Local officials should start substantial damage estimation as soon as possible that it's safe to get into these neighborhoods.
As a building official, you need to get out in the communities. You need to see what damages have occurred, what has to be done.
Property owners will be anxious to begin repairing or reconstructing their homes or businesses. If reconstruction were to begin without the proper review and approval by local officials, several problems can result. Reconstruction might actually occur in violation of the local floodplain management ordinance.
Also, the longer you wait, local officials are going to have a hard time separating what was actually damaged versus repairs or improvements that might be going on.
Community officials can perform several important actions before a disaster occurs to facilitate substantial damage determinations after the event. Important preparatory measures to take include developing a pre-disaster plan, which should include selecting an SDE coordinator. This individual should be familiar with the NFIP requirements, be the substantial damage estimation expert for the community, and be responsible for staff training, data collection, and record keeping. As a second step, the community should develop a brief post-disaster action plan. This plan should address staffing, field mobilization including property entry procedures and notification of property authorities, and record keeping. As a third step, the SDE coordinator or his or her designee should identify available data resources needed to make or support substantial damage determinations, including flood insurance rate maps, firms, digital firms, D-firms, tax parcel and street maps, tax assessment information, permit data, and sources of replacement costs and market values. The SDE coordinator should review and organize community maps of flood-prone or repetitive loss areas ahead of time and identify the structure types and building characteristics within the flood-prone areas of the community. This may require field work. If a community has repetitive loss data in FEMA's National Flood Mitigation Data Collection Tool for repetitive loss structures, some of that data may be useful to import into the SDE tool. The SDE coordinator should identify the source of data that will be used for the property's replacement values. The market value can be determined within the SDE software by applying a depreciation factor to the replacement value. The SDE coordinator might also choose to use tax assessment data, properly adjusted to reflect current market values, or even appraisals if they are available. The community should be consistent with their methodology and should make these decisions prior to a disaster event. Finally, any data that has been developed for structures in the SFHA can be entered into the SDE software before a disaster. Data can be pre-entered into the data fields on the first three tabs of the SDE software: address, structure, damage, NFIP information, and base cost. The damage estimation cannot be computed until after the disaster occurs and the damages are observed and recorded. In order to begin full damage inspection fieldwork and data entry, an SDE coordinator will need to take the following steps. 1. The identified SDE team should collect information about flood depths, wind speeds, etc. that can be helpful in understanding what type of damage to expect. Initial screenings of damage to structures in the regulatory floodplain should be completed by the SDE coordinator or someone on his or her team in order to identify areas where efforts will need to be concentrated. 2. The SDE coordinator should notify relevant community officials about the planned substantial damage determination efforts so that they are aware of the fieldwork. 3. The SDE coordinator must ensure members of SDE field assessment teams are trained in the use of the SDE tool, including damage estimation, prior to beginning their fieldwork. 4. The SDE coordinator must plan fieldwork for the teams and provide assignments using a map to determine routes for each assessment team and to mark off properties as the assessments have been completed. Some key points to convey to team members during training include: 1. Safety is a priority, and inspectors should use protective equipment such as goggles, hard hats, gloves, and boots. 2. Acceptable procedures for gaining access to buildings. 3. Not to discuss the impact of the damage estimate on reconstruction or acquisition programs with property owners or renters. 4. Determine ahead of time who will be entering field-collected data into the SDE software and when this will occur. 5. The residential and non-residential building elements that each team will need to assess for damage. 6. The SDE evaluation process relies to some extent on the judgment of the inspectors on the field assessment teams. It is not an exact science. Different inspectors will produce slightly different estimates on the value of the adjustments or the extent of damages. This is one of the advantages of having two team members and thus two opinions from which to gain consensus.
One of the last steps of the training should be a field visit or a pilot visit to some damaged structures. You're going to want to look at 1 to 3 residential and probably 1 to 3 non-residential structures. This gives the class a chance to actually apply the knowledge they've learned in the classroom in the field. An experienced instructor should be there with the class in order to watch them do an assessment and give them feedback on their findings, just to kind of make sure that they're doing it correctly and that the numbers that they're coming up with are accurate.
In order to make the damage assessment consistent and thorough, each team must follow a set procedure when performing the evaluation. The more consistent the approach, the more confidence property owners will have in the results. Before starting an assessment, the inspector should confirm that they have permission or legal authority to enter the structure. The inspector should start the inspection with an exterior walk around the entire house to view the roof, exterior walls, and foundation. Next, the inspector should enter the house after verifying the stability of the structure and move systematically through it on a room-by-room basis. Inspectors should fill out the damage inspection worksheet as they conduct the inspection, take photographs, and use a photo log. They should note significant upgrades or custom-designed interiors. Key building characteristics or structure attributes should be noted, including the number of stories, presence of heating or cooling systems, and the type of foundation, superstructure, roof covering, and exterior finish for residential structures. For non-residential structures, the presence of conveyance and fire protection systems should be noted. Inspectors must always remember that they are in someone's home or business and be sure to minimize any invasive procedures, such as pulling back the drywall to inspect framing. Instead, they should try to find areas already exposed. When using the SDE tool, inspectors will be evaluating damage to each identified building element. For residential structures, these elements include: 1. Foundation. Examples of foundation systems include slab-on-grade, continuous perimeter wall or small piers, wood piles, and concrete piers. 2. Superstructure. Framing of structure, including wall support systems and structural members that support the roof. Exterior sheathing panels, shear panels, and braced wall panels are part of the superstructure. 3. Roof covering. Roof sheathing, flashing, and covering. 4. Exterior finish. Wall covering system that goes over the sheathing, including insulation, water-resistant materials, and finish materials. 5. Interior finish. Gypsum board, drywall, plaster, wall paneling, trim, moldings, paint, stain, and varnish. 6. Doors and windows. Windows and both interior and exterior doors and associated hardware. 7. Cabinets and countertops. Kitchen cabinets, bathroom vanities, and countertops. 8. Floor finish. Includes carpet, hardwood, vinyl, tile, and other finish types. 9. Plumbing. Incoming water service and distribution systems, sinks, toilets, tubs, shower, water heater, and wastewater system. 10. Electrical. Electrical service, wiring, outlets, switches, and fixtures. 11. Appliances. Built-in appliances, including dishwashers. 12. HVAC. Heating and cooling system, including furnace, heat pump, air handler, compressor, and ductwork. Non-residential structures include only 7 elements: foundation, superstructure, roof covering, plumbing, electrical, interiors, and HVAC. These elements are similar to those for residential with the following exceptions. 1. Superstructure. For the purposes of non-residential evaluation, exterior finishes and doors and windows are considered part of the superstructure. Like the superstructure element for residential structures, it also includes the structure framing, wall support systems, and roof structural members. 2. Interiors. Many of the individual elements called out for residential structures are combined under interiors for non-residential structures, including interior finish, cabinets and countertops, floor finishes, and built-in appliances. The field workbook includes guidance on making damage estimations for each of the building elements.
For instance, when you're looking at the foundation, something that's just minimal scour, no damage to any of the foundation components, that would probably be in the lower range of 0 to 25%. Something where you have significant scour, large cracks, displacement of foundation members, that's something that would be on the upper end, the 75 to 100%.
Any significant upgrades or custom-designed interiors should be noted. The SDE software allows for such refinements. As teams finish their inspection, they should mark off completed areas on a single reference map. This will help avoid missing houses or assessing them twice.
Once the field inspections are complete, each team is going to need to enter their findings into a computer, either in the field or back at the office. You're going to want to upload the photos that you collected in the field into the software as well, using the Files and Photo tab.
The SDE software is user-friendly. The SDE User's Manual will answer many questions users may have about entering data. Once the user has selected the type of structure for which he or she will be entering data, a data entry screen with a series of tabs will appear. The sequenced tabs indicate the order in which the user should enter the data. The damage inspection worksheets are ordered in the same manner to assist in easy transfer of the information to the software. When creating records with the SDE tool, the user has the option of creating property records only or full assessment records. The property records include basic address and property owner information. The assessment records include all the additional information associated with the software. To complete assessment records, the user will work through 6 separate screens or tabs of the SDE software. Tab 1. Address. Basic property location and ownership information is entered here, along with NFIP community name and identification number. Tab 2. Structure damage NFIP information. Structure-specific data, damage information, inspector contact information, and FIS firm data is entered on this tab. Tab 3. Cost. Cost data necessary to determine the replacement value of the structure is entered, including a unit cost per square foot and additional adjustments. Tab 4. Element percentages. Field-collected damage data is entered on this tab. Enter the damage percentages for each of the building elements based on site observations. Tab 5, Output Summary, provides overall damage percentage once all required data is input. Note that radio buttons can be selected to indicate alternative, acceptable values for damage or market values other than those determined using the SDE software. Tab 6, Files and Photos, allows upload of pictures of the structure taken during site inspection and any other supporting documentation. These files become part of the database and are attached to the record. There are also tabs created displaying previous assessment data if past assessments for a property are stored within the program. For instance, a tab titled Assessment of 9/30/08 will display substantial damage assessment results for data collected on September 30th, 2008. After data entry is complete, the user should print out the SDE summary report and have the local official review, approve, and then sign it at the bottom of the last page. Local officials must contact owners to inform them of their findings. All owners of structures that were inspected as part of the inventory should be notified via letter about the results of the SDE determinations. If the structure is not substantially damaged, the letter only needs to notify the owner that floodplain development permits will be required prior to rebuilding activities. If the structure is substantially damaged, the letter should indicate this to the owner and identify a person the owner may contact to discuss rebuilding alternatives and requirements. The owner is responsible for scheduling a meeting with the designated point of contact. Structures that are substantially damaged must be repaired or rebuilt in compliance with local floodplain regulations. Local or model building codes in effect may require additional flood protection measures, such as incorporating freeboard when structures are rebuilt or retrofitted. Property owners may wish to submit additional information regarding damage to their property, either to clarify questions from the local building official or to appeal a substantial damage finding. Any information submitted by owners or obtained by other means, such as insurance claim data, contractor repair estimates, or professional appraisals, should be saved by the local official and can be uploaded directly to the software via the Files and Photos tab.
One of the benefits for using the SDE software is that the local official can print out a detailed summary report that gives property owners the information on how their structure was evaluated. The building official can sit down with property owners to show how the determination was made and the data that was collected and used in the evaluation.
We've now covered the basics of using the SDE software, including what you need to look for when examining a structure, what kinds of information you need to collect, and how to enter the information into the software. The SDE software allows you to quickly, consistently, and fairly assess whether structures have received substantial damage from any type of event. The software can be used for a single structure or a large number of structures affected by an event to assist making substantial damage determinations. And it provides reasonable and defendable building replacement costs and percent damage estimates.
One of the advantages of using the SDE is that you can manage a large amount of damaged properties in one database. You can use it now and in advance of any future disasters. You can also have that data all together in one database.
So anything you can do to help build that database prior to any of these events would be beneficial to you, your staff, and the officials within the community.
In communities that are prepared for disasters and have collected and assembled data important for disaster response and recovery, the SDE software facilitates a rapid assessment of damage and provides communities with reasonable estimates that comply with local ordinances.
Okay, so yeah, I just wanted to show you that. I think it is helpful to see some of it, even though that video is a little bit outdated. It's kind of back when they were on the first version of it. We're now on version 3.0, so it is a little bit more updated than what you're seeing there, but it might help to see some of that like inspection and damage footage that they had. So yeah, definitely the publications associated with substantial improvement and damage, the desk reference is very helpful. If you have any damage or improvement questions that come up, that publication goes very far into depth into all of the aspects of enforcing those rules. And as I said, under the Help tab, you'll find the Estimator user manual and the field workbook, which are helpful resources when you're actually using the software to do the assessments. And then there's also the SDE Best Practices publication, which is just 16 pages that kind of goes into common issues that people have using the software and how to resolve them. Pre-populating the data, collection of data. The user manual goes into like what to look for as far as evaluating the different elements of a structure, how to use photos and not have sizes too large to you might bog down your software and that kind of thing. So it's just a quick 16-page document that also supplements that. If you have technical difficulties, there is help available through the FEMA Building Science email there. So if you give them up to 5 days to respond, they may be able to help. I might be able to help, but they're really there for the technical support, and they have that contact information in the software as well. I also recommend using the FEMA Independent Study course on using the tool. So I went back through this yesterday, and there's sample estimations that you can do. There's a couple of activities, and so really I think one of the most important things is just to familiarize yourself with the software. They give you sample data, and you can go through and walk through doing a residential and non-residential assessment. And so like they said, having this stuff prepared and ready to go before something happens is an important part of that. So in our last class, post-flood responsibility, we talked about having a pre-disaster plan so that you have these systems in place. Of course, we're only doing damage estimations in the special flood hazard area. So in your mapped floodplain, so the areas that would be in the blue lines and everything outside of that would not have to be assessed for substantial damage unless you have other areas that you regulate that are adopted into your ordinance specifically. And so here's a map from the Eureka tornado in 2016. So this one also followed the floodplain pretty closely. So we have this overlay map where we can see the path of the tornado and then our green structures that were in the floodplain and were damaged. And so, as I said, we're only looking at the areas in the floodplain, those damaged structures, and where it overlaps, because the first thing you want to do is set up a scope so that you know how much damage you're looking at, how many structures, and then you would be planning your assessments from there on. And so in this presentation and in the video, they kind of talk about having assessment teams and an SDE expert person. And I realize in some smaller communities that may not be the case. You might not have all of the staff that you would need to get it done. Of course, we will help as much as we can, which may include going to your community to help with those assessments, depending on, again, the scope of damage. We could be working with multiple communities. And so we would just have to communicate after the disaster to determine what all needs to happen. You might have FEMA get deployed to your community if it's a large enough disaster. So having that scope is really the first step in determining how the assessment should play out. Okay. So again, like the video said, if you're in a participating community, then you are obligated to do the assessments to determine whether or not substantial damage has happened. And again, that's from any source. It's not just flooding. It includes fire, tornado, earthquake, or even if a car crashed into a building in the floodplain, we would have to do the assessment. And then if it hits the threshold, we have to bring that structure into compliance with your current regulations if it's not already. That structure may already be elevated high enough, and then it can just be repaired. And getting compliance from other types of disasters that are not flooding can be a little bit more difficult, as people don't see the point in complying with your floodplain regulations after they've had a fire or something, like they're not making the connection between the cost of the investment versus the flood risk that it's facing. And so, as I've said before, disaster recovery is often the hardest part of being a floodplain manager. So again, substantial damage from any origin sustained by the structure where the cost to restore it to its pre-damage condition would be 50% or more of the market value. And then improvement kind of goes hand in hand with that. It's sort of the same thing where if someone is improving a structure, if the cost of that improvement costs 50% or more of the market value before the start of construction, then it would also count. So they are kind of two sides of the same coin. And it does clarify there before the start of construction or the pre-damage values. So it's not to a pristine condition, it's to whatever the market value was before it was damaged. And so those are the numbers that we're looking at. And that would include the cost to repair to the pre-damage condition, whether or not they actually go through with all of the repairs. It's kind of the same thing with donated labor or materials. We have to count those costs, whether they were actually paid for or not is irrelevant to this calculation. And then there are, for historic structures, historic structures just kind of have their own exemptions to rules sometimes, but basically any project for improvements to correct violations and all of that, basically just making sure it stays a historic structure. We don't deal with that too much. Okay. So as I said, this is kind of the idyllic situation where you'd have sufficient staff to do assessments with like multiple teams. And so I understand it sometimes might just be one floodplain administrator, maybe one other staff member having to organize this. Of course, if there's any disasters or flooding, let us know so we can help as much as possible. But ideally, you'd have an SDE manager that kind of organizes the entire operation of doing the assessment. So making sure officials are notified. We definitely want, police to know that you're going to be entering people's structures, identifying the resources, working with the other departments, planning the field inspections, like which teams are going to go to which properties, and making sure you have the full list of properties that you're going to need to assess, training the inspectors, working with them, making sure everybody's on the same page and will provide consistent data on doing the assessments. And then they're supervising that and coordinating with any follow-up, establishing the scope, getting the tax parcel map and other tax data that you might need. Hopefully like one department, if it's not the SDE manager, can do that overlay map so that you have the boundaries of your damaged areas and your floodplain, and then you would have the list of properties that are in the overlap. And then, as I said, the initial screening of structures, so you want to do a curbside review where you look at the structures and determine which ones are high, medium, or low damaged, and then go for the medium ones first. And then, based on your scope, after you've determined that and the number of structures and everything, what kind of timeline are you working on? Because as I said, you want to get them done as soon as possible. And so we need to have target dates set and maybe put some milestones in there to make sure we're making sufficient progress, because like they said, people want to try to recover and rebuild as fast as possible, which means they might not want to wait for an assessment, the final determination, and get the permitting, which is part of the requirements. And as I said before, we are likely to audit you about a year after the disaster just to determine that everything was permitted properly and to help you fix some of that if needed. And then you have the final plan for the data collection, the schedule, and hopefully you would have data and quality assurance leads as well to assist you through the digestion of that data and make sure that everything looks correct. And so I'm hopefully saving enough time for us to look through the different aspects of the software. And then if we have some time at the end, I will try to do a bit of a demo on that. So the field prep, again, notifying the police and other community officials about the inspections, doing a press release. As I said before, I'm really in favor of doing a door hanger. So right after something happens, going out to these properties and giving them a bundle of information, including permitting and letting them know that you're going to do an inspection and when. Gathering that property and structure data. So I would really encourage you to have a property inventory in your SDE software before something happens, because you don't want to be scrambling around trying to get tax assessor and other property and structure data for your floodplain properties after something has happened. Making sure you know the floodplain boundaries, having your two-person teams, and you probably need to have some kind of relationship with your tax assessor office so that they know what you need and then how much time they're going to need to assemble it. And then determining the scheduling, how many inspections can be completed per day. And again, what is our target date for completing that field work? And then again, if you have an inspection lead, that they understand what the requirements are, all of the elements that need to be evaluated on the structures, understanding the tool, is coordinating the field materials, verifying the work hours, working with the city officials, making sure that your instructions are followed, tracking the progress, making sure that's staying on track, reviewing the data. So you have your quality assurance person or the SDE inspection lead is reviewing the data for correctness and making sure that the teams are producing consistent assessments. And then identifying what areas might be inaccessible because it's too dangerous or it's unstable, or getting permission to enter private property. And then the tax data. So this is the type of data you need for the address or NFIP info tab. So having that, again, ready to go before something happens. So we'll look at the software, but you can have a property inventory. So all of these, property files, and then you can pick which ones need to be assessed and then put those into a database. So we'll look at that. But you can sort them alphabetically by street name and then numerically, which is how the software works basically. And then so verify locations at the physical inspection, the square footage, the number of stories. And so that's the type of data that you could already have in there that's not likely to change unless someone did an addition or something like that. Making sure that the inspection findings verifies the tax data. So if you have like an inspection that says there's 2 stories, but it's a structure that has 1 story, there's definitely something wrong there. So you can put in the structure data, and then the assessment data is what would be done later on when you start the actual assessments and bring in that field data from the inspections. And if you have property structure data that is available in either an Excel file or a CSV file, you can import it into the software as long as you map where the data corresponds to the SDE fields. So I think actually in using this software that might be the most difficult part to learn and to work with. And so if you were going to do that, doing it beforehand, or getting comfortable with knowing how to do that beforehand. So this is where you can find it. You can just look up FEMA SDE or FEMA SDE 3.0, and it should pull it up pretty quickly and to a page where you can download the software. And then, as I said, the user manual and the field workbook are part of the software. And then there's two different versions. There's a standalone version. So that version is only users of the host computer can access the database, or the client server where multiple people can access the database once they are mapped to it in the network drive. So depending on your needs as a community, which one you would use, but I think you can only pick between the two the first time you open the database, and then it's just kind of set that way. So make sure that you're aware of that and you're picking the right one to work for you. Again, so we're talking about large scale disasters or just a house fire on one structure. You can use the software for that as well. But it does help with the streamlining organization and making sure that you have everything that you need for the FEMA requirements, and then it gives you a really nice, concise summary report that can be printed and signed like you saw in the video. So it's very professional looking, and I definitely would recommend using this unless you have something else in place. Or multiple structures. Like I said, this is Coffeyville in 2007, where they had this pretty large flood event, much larger than the base flood. And then the refinery was flooded and a lot of oil got out into the water and destroyed, and definitely contributed to the substantial damage of over 400 structures. So again, we're looking at the market value versus the cost to repair to the pre-damage condition. So it's the fair market value prior to the damage, and then you compare that to the cost to repair, and then that is your percentage, whether it's 50% or more would be substantial damage. Again, we're talking about the pre-damage condition, not pristine condition. So using the software may not be a requirement for you if you have contractors' estimations. So some communities just require the property owner to supply that from a licensed contractor, and that's fine. However, you want to do assessments and approach disasters and resolving disputes, you should really just make sure that your other community officials, your governing body are on board with that, and then you should put it down in writing in your written administrative procedures or somewhere, some internal document or something where people can see it and understand how these are done. So this is the market value for the structure excluding the land, and so sometimes appraisals or other resources might include the land value. So we just need to make sure that we are not including anything that is outside the structure. Its location is definitely going to impact the value of it. So we're just looking at the structure by itself. And so the SDE software default is to calculate it based on a base cost for your location and then multiply that by the square footage. And so that is the calculator that you saw, and I will show that to you. Other than that, we can use the property tax assessment records because they're public, everyone knows about them, and they are basically accepted by the property owner as their market value because they have the chance to dispute that if they want to. And so if they don't, then that's a usable number. A bill of sale, if it's a recent sale, otherwise we'd have to factor in somehow the depreciation. Insurance settlements can be used. Sometimes structures are underinsured and have a high deductible, and maybe depreciation would play into that. So that might not be the best source. And then an appraisal from a licensed appraiser is another reliable source, and that is likely what would be used to dispute something. So if you do a bunch of determinations and then someone disputes that, they can submit an appraisal, and then you can go back through your assessment and adjust anything to make sure that it makes sense and that they are on board with your decisions. Okay, so here's the cost tab. And so we'll go back through, and the address and structure information are pretty straightforward. It's, the information about the property, the owner, the inspector, and your mapping data. So under the cost tab, again, the default here is to have a base cost, and then that is the cost per square foot, and then you can calculate the square footage in there. And then on the right side, you can see the computed actual cash value. So that's where your output's gonna go in, and then you have the depreciation rating there. And so this is based on the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers scale on depreciation. So it's like 1 is dilapidated, uninhabitable, all the way up to 6, which is like brand new and in excellent condition, basically 2 years or less in age. And then you have like 4 and 5 at average, and 5 a little bit above average. So the workbook and the user manual have all of this information in there so that you can look at it to evaluate what is an appropriate rating. The same thing with the initial building quality. So that's the drop list that you see at the bottom, the quality of how it was built originally. So we're factoring in all of these other things to come up with a computed actual cash value. And as I said, any cost adjustments that should go in there. So underneath the calculator, it says like roofing, heating and cooling appliances. And so basically, if there's anything special or custom made about those elements that might contribute something to the market value, you can add that in there. Or, a property owner might bring something to your attention that they had custom made or something like that, that might be above what the average cost of those things would be. So that's the cost adjustments here. Most of it will be left blank if it's just, your basic quality of your normal features. And okay, so we are about 5 minutes away from the hour. I thought we could do our first poll question and then take a quick break and then come back and finish this up. And so again, if you want credit, I need you to participate in the 2 poll questions. And so this is the first one. When are damage assessments required in the floodplain from flood damage, tornado, fire, or all of the above? So I'll give you a couple seconds to answer that. Okay, maybe 10 more seconds. I don't know if anyone has answered anything.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cheyenne, I forgot to make you co-host. Yes,
Okay.
it looks like we do have 8 of 9 participated, so
Okay,
I think
cool.
that's most everyone. I will go ahead and make you co-host. Sorry about that, and I will end the poll
That's okay.
and share those results. And so it looks like everybody got that one right.
Yay. Yeah. So damage from any cause. So that would be all of the above plus anything else that could possibly happen to a structure. So, okay, awesome. We can take a quick break here and come back at, I don't know, like 3 after the hour, like 10:03. I'll be back. And then we'll just pick up and finish from there. Okay, so it's 3 after. Hopefully everyone is back from the quick break. And so, as I said, cost of materials, so anything associated with doing the actual repairs, so the materials and the fair market value of those materials, which includes labor, so cost of labor, and these other things. You might use a cost estimating guide, which is like Marshall and Swift or R&S or RS, something. So your appraiser might have copies of that. It comes in software now as well. Again, volunteer labor. It doesn't include debris removal, cleanup, building plans, permit fees, the surveying. So here's the full list. You know, we don't have to go through all of it, but it kind of just illustrates what kind of stuff we're looking at, whereas the stuff that's outside of the structure or not actually part of the structure, we don't count them, like plug-in appliances, carpeting if it's over a finished floor, cited health violations. So if there are code violations that were cited by a community official before that, we don't count the cost to repair those. Any outdoor landscaping, that kind of thing, we don't count. Built-in appliances, the utilities servicing the buildings, the cabinets, the finishes, any cost to elevate the structure, all of that would be included. And so you can find these full lists in the SISD desk reference. So
Hey,
again, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Giant, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. For
Mhm.
some reason at the top of the screen, we're seeing your Zoom controls. It blocks a little bit of the text. I don't know
That's
why.
weird.
Yeah, it is weird. I don't remember Zoom doing that before.
If I stop and reshare. Yeah, I was never sure if you guys could see those or not.
You know, I don't think I used to be able to, but I definitely see them or saw them. Yeah, I still see them up there. That's so weird. And it doesn't block much. So if it's tricky to figure out, it's probably okay. I thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, that's kind of annoying. Yeah, I might have to look into that later.
Okay,
Sorry
that's
about
okay.
that.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay. Okay. So yeah, again, cost to repair, deferred maintenance, which would be like peeling paint, old shingles that need to be replaced, window caulking, like these sort of small damages to the finishing of the structure is not something that would be included because they were technically that way before the disaster event. So it's not included, which it might be hard to distinguish that, I guess, after something has been damaged, but you know, just taking that into account. So avoiding conflict is something we'd like to do if possible. So obviously property owners are not to be doing their own assessments. I'm not sure if that is an issue that has come up before, but they are definitely not an objective party that can do that. The same way with contractors trying to get business. It's not the same as getting an estimate from a contractor. So we don't want that. Any inconsistencies like that can delegitimize the entire community-wide assessments. And so that's why we want a consistent process, put it in writing, make sure your governing board is okay with it, so that everyone is in agreement on how they should be done, what an appropriate base cost is, having all of this ready to go before something happens. You might have a moratorium on issuing permits until the scope and location of the damage is evaluated. And then you might issue permits if the property owner can provide a contractor's estimate, proving that it's less than substantial damage. And of course, if you have cumulative substantial damage standards in your ordinance adopted, then you would be comparing it to any other permits that were issued within that 5-year window. and making sure that any extra improvements that they were going to do would also count towards that, or any improvements that they had done before the damage had occurred. And so these are the residential elements. Like they said, there's these ones are a little bit different from the non-residential structures. And so the foundation, superstructure, roof covering, plumbing, the electrical interiors and HVAC, and the percentage damaged. Again, if you look in the workbook and the user manual, they have information about how to do the assessments and determine the percentages. And then it's just automatically calculated into your assessment when you add it here. And then the residential ones. So there's a little bit more as far as like, I guess, built-in furniture or like finishes that wouldn't be present in a non-residential structure. So you have like the floor finish, the plumbing, cabinets, countertops, the built-in appliances, and all of that. And then here is an example of what to look for as far as the foundation. So seeing if it's cracked, has it shifted away from the structure itself? The roof covering, if it's sagging, watermarks, dripping water could indicate that it's damaged and thoroughly saturated if we're talking about flooding. So these are helpful, again, going through with your assessment teams or any other person that would be helping you do the assessments and making sure that you're on the same page about how the data is collected and making sure it looks consistent. Okay, so there are limitations to the software. They don't do the assessments for you. They just streamline doing the input of all the data that would be needed to generate the assessment. So there's not exact values for the element percent damaged. And because you have those three options for determining the structure value between calculating it with the base cost and the square footage calculator, you can have the appraisal or the tax assessment value, whatever you're using. It might be slightly different. And so that's, again, why you want to have the consistent method and have that approved by the governing body so that everyone is in agreement about what the best method would be to use and then use that for everybody. So as long as you have that down pat, then you have the benefits of the software, which is having this organized database that organizes all of your property data. You have the defensible structure-specific estimates, and you have the summary reports that are very concise, or you can print out a detailed report for the property owner that shows them the damage assessment percentages for the different characteristics, and it has more detail in it. It's like a 5-page report, which might be helpful if they are trying to dispute your determination. It's FEMA accepted. And then, yeah, they can be used in support of making the ICC claim if it's a flood insurance claim. So you have data management and the quality assurance. So as long as you are doing your part as the building official with the authority to make the determinations and that everyone has that methodology known and written down, then it should be fine. Again, there's server. If you're in charge of assigning the damage assessments to other inspectors, the client, if you are to be an inspector, and then the standalone if you're not. And so what I've been using is the standalone. I haven't really worked with the other ones because I haven't really needed it to explore the software. So you can just look at and play around with the software in the standalone version. And I haven't had any issues with like any technical difficulties or where I didn't save my data, but you might want to get in the habit of hitting save every time you move between tabs because apparently it can be deleted. There is an installation manual should you need it. I did not need it. It was pretty straightforward. I don't think it's very difficult software to work with. So, But yeah, you might have issues that you'd have to work with your IT administrator on. And of course, you want to have all of this worked out before something happens. So that's why I would recommend you getting into the software, kind of getting comfortable with it and making sure you're not going to have any technical difficulties in the field or with your inspection teams. So again, the user manual is in here. It's under the help tab. So then it's also right there on the main page of the software. So you open that and it has the workbook in there. And then there's spell check features. There's a little bit of photo editing software in there. And again, you can use the enterprise imports from non-SDE sources. So if you want to use that, if you have property and structured data compiled from a different resource, you could import it. Again, if it's an Excel file or a CSV file. Excuse me. So the older version of this software was called RSDE, and it was only for residential structures. And of course, in the video, we saw the older version of it. It now has residential and non-residential structures in there. So just a little bit of history on the software. Not exactly sure when it came out, but so yeah, it's fully versatile now. And so there are like, what is it, like 30 or so different non-residential structure uses. And so if you can't find exactly what it is, you'd want to use a best fit non-residential structure. So for a medical office, your options would be like, is it more like a hospital or is it more of an office building? So you'd probably want to go with office buildings on that one and make a 1-story elementary school versus a 2 to 4 story high school. So you might, just flip through to different uses and try to find the best fit. So there is a bit of a judgment call. Like they said, doing assessments is not an exact science. We just want to have a reasonable assessment done that would include the use of the structure. And so like a factory, warehouse, and that kind of thing, factories are going to be lower quality construction than an office building or a house of worship, that kind of thing. So it's really a matter of considering what the structure was originally built for and the type of materials and what kind of non-residential structure best fits that. Okay. So common mistakes, brick veneer, and there are other types of veneers that are siding options that are not actually part of the superstructure. And then there's like brick built structures. So being able to recognize that kind of thing, the different exterior finishes that you're going to come across. If it's marked as uninhabitable, like from the emergency management department, it doesn't always mean it's substantially damaged. It could be a gas leak, or it could mean it's substantially damaged. And like an apartment building should be, you would use a non-residential assessment for that. The same thing, there are residential structures that have been converted into offices, like manufactured homes or traditional stick-built homes that have been converted into a salon or something like that. So again, we're looking at the material and how the structure was originally built. And so there's a manufactured home option that you would want to use under the residential structure assessments. And so yeah, we're just looking at the original thing. I've also seen like an old bank with a vault that was converted into an apartment building, and then we would want to use a non-residential assessment for that. So looking at how it was originally built, which might be a little bit counterintuitive because usually in floodplain management, we're looking at how the structure is used. Like if there's any residential use, we'd be elevating it. And so just being aware of that. And then again, training the inspectors. So anyone who's going to be doing inspections, everyone should go out on the pilot inspections, maybe 3 structures, 3 or 4, to have that guidance and training materials, how you want the data recorded in the field. Should it be taken by hand, or are they going to be taking tablets and laptops out there? So understanding that data collection, how to take photos, because you'd want at least 2 photos for every structure, and then having the whiteboard on there that has either the property or a temporary ID number. Sometimes you don't have the address information when you're starting the assessments. So you might assign structures a temporary ID number and then make sure you're recording the GPS coordinates for that structure to within like 5 decimal places to make sure that it couldn't be mistaken for a different one if you don't have the property information available. So yeah, making sure everyone's streamlined, however you're gonna do the data collection. And of course, the differences between residential and non-residential assessments. The non-residential are typically gonna take a bit longer. I think it's like 45 minutes to an hour and a half, something like that, whereas a residential structure is closer to an hour. The benefits of the tool, increase consistency and quality. So making sure they are familiar with the tool if they're going to be using it. The GPS units, of course, all the data required, so what all elements of the structure they need to assess. And then, yeah, the inspector interaction and guidance. Oh, wait, sorry, it's right there, 40 to 90 minutes, and then 40 to 120 minutes. Sorry, are you guys hearing that little notification noise?
Yes, but everyone
Okay.
appears to be on mute, so I'm wondering if it's from your computer.
I think so. 'Cause
Okay.
shared in such a way that I could share the sound before.
Ah,
so I
okay,
don't know.
that might make sense.
Okay, it should be off now. Sorry. Okay.
And now it's not in the presentation mode, it's in the speaker mode. So we don't see the full screen of that. That looks good.
Okay. Sorry guys for the technical difficulties here. Okay. And then not all elements are equal. Clearly, some of them are going to contribute a lot more to the market value, such as like the HVAC unit compared to the like bottom cabinets. There's quite a bit of difference in value there. So just making sure that we are, evaluating them all consistently. So this is what the software looks like now. Like I said, it's a little bit different from how it looked in the video. So my database is called Training Class, just because I've been, messing around with it as just training to refamiliarize myself with it. So this is the main menu. So this is where you can add new properties. So once you start a database, you can start adding in your properties. Like I said, you want to have the inventory of your floodplain properties beforehand. And that way you are ready to go. And you can just start new assessments for the ones that become damaged. And so so at the top, you have view and search all records. That will open up your entire inventory of list of properties. The bulk editor means you can edit the fields all at once, and then enter default data is where you can enter the data that will pre-populate. And so if you have a community that just has like one firm panel, you could put all of your map information in there or other information. We'll look at it. And then at the bottom, you can add a new residential assessment or start a new non-residential assessment. There's then at the resources, there's some web references, so they have links to different FEMA publications and stuff that might be helpful. And then of course the user manual and the workbook are right there on the left side. And then reports, imports, exports, geofiles. So this is where you can import and export data as an Excel file. Again, you can import data from a non-SDE source as long as it's in the right format. You can create reports or generate a geo file. You can make KMZ files that you can bring into Google Maps or whatever the case may be. So this is the property details. So as soon as we start an assessment, there's information on the left for the structure, owner, details, the street name, the address, the city, state, county, and zip code. So those are things you might want to have default data in to automatically pre-populate, and that way you don't have to worry about mistakes. And that's information that's not going to change between structures. If you're creating your property inventory, you can also do this with so the other NFIP information, the community number, community ID, the panel. Depending on if you're in an unincorporated area, then there's going to be multiple panels. So not that one, but as you're building your inventory, you can have the specific information in there for the individual property though, and then save it, and then you can start an assessment later on. So you can have all of this specific information for like the panel number for that particular structure put in there, their zone, the base flood elevation, whether or not they're in the floodway, and that. So again, we want to be able to save as much time as possible. So definitely not putting all of this together after a disaster. And so this information is from my previous supervisor, Steve, who had shared this information to kind of go through doing an assessment. So I'm just kind of, looking at all the structure and property data that we would have for this particular structure, which is in Lyon County. It's in the unincorporated area. It's not in the floodway. Base flood elevation is 1130.1. And then just all of the basic structure data. And so again, we're looking at the initial construction quality, which might be something difficult to get. I think maybe your tax assessor could help with that. If you have a building official, I think having a qualified official to help supplement some of this information would be helpful if you have that. Otherwise, you might have to get creative to get some of that information. And then the depreciation that was already there to the pre-damage condition. So you have the USACE or the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers scale on that, and then the percent damage for each of the elements. So some of this information, again, enter as much as you can in the office before we go out into the field. So elevation certificates, if there's that for the structure, then you'd have the precise base flood elevation and some other structure information, the type of foundation. You would have the map information, permit files. Of course, that's going to be important if you're practicing cumulative stuff, and any other damage or improvement that happened in the last calendar year. So if you don't have cumulative standards adopted, then it's 1 calendar year instead of 5. So making sure that you're taking that into account. Definitely the county appraiser, that is definitely helpful in having that relationship with them, and the tax assessor's office cost estimation guide. So I have a slide on that just kind of shows what those look like, and then the flood maps and the field inspections, of course, and then having a photo for each of them. So this one is from a parcel search. Again, as soon as you're in the field, you want to take field photos, not so much again to document the damage that you're assessing, but to make sure that you're at the right structure and that the structure information is matching up with the picture. So that's why you write the address or the ID number and all of the other information as you're going out and doing that. So having the fermets or the flood maps. So again, you'd want to have the overlap area mapped either as part of a fermet, or your city GIS department might put together that overlay map, but definitely having some information about the floodplain and what structures you're assessing. And so this is Steve's house that we were looking at the property information. So it's actually not in the floodplain, but it's directly adjacent to it. And so, of course, in this example, we were pretending that it was in the floodplain. And then field inspections provide water depth and element percentages. So sometimes you have these high water lines that you can see on fences adjacent to the structure or on the structure, and that information is really useful to us and determining the percent damaged. So this is a manufactured home in this example, and so it was inundated above the first floor, which typically means it's going to be substantially damaged. And so having this information can help with making those determinations. So information that can be gleaned from the appraiser website is the year built, the square footage, the grade factor, so the initial construction quality might be in there, and that's helpful because it's something that is asked for in the software. The building value based on property tax information and owners' names. So having that parcel search website can help with a lot of this information. And like I said, a lot of these things are not likely to change except for the depreciation and maybe the square footage if they do in addition or something like that, but you should have permit information on that if that is the case. And then, so you would add a residential assessment. And so once you click on that, it will open up your residential property files that you have in here. So from your inventory, you could start picking out which ones need to be assessed. And then once you've selected that, you hit use selected property, and then it takes you to the address tab. And so like I said, if you already have some of this information in here, it will be a lot easier for you as you are working through doing an assessment. So hopefully you can get some of this in there already. And then there's space for phone numbers, which you might want to put in there. But the important information like the community ID and the actual street number and the suffix and the city and all of that. And then, yeah, excuse me, the structure. So yeah, the same information, latitude and longitude should be easy to get from Google Maps or whatever resource you're using. And then you can check this if it's the same as the structure address. So, and then like I said, you want to hit save as you move through the different tabs, just in case you don't want to accidentally delete a full page of information. And then if you had to, go back out to the structure and do another assessment, that would be pretty bad. And then as you move between tabs, it will let you know if there's any issues that it's seeing, that you've left something blank that needs to be in there to be able to complete an assessment, like the residence type, and having some kind of depreciation number, some value selected for that. So it will give you these warnings to make sure that you haven't missed anything by accident. And then, yeah, use the information to fill out the address tab. So this is just saying like all the information that Steve gave us about his structure is what we'd want to be using if we were doing an assessment on his house. So yeah, and then once you get through that, there's the inspector information. So the inspector's name and number, the date the damage occurred, the date you're doing the assessment, and then the cause of damage. So like they said in the video, there's flood, wind, fire, seismic, and then there's like an other option. And so if you click on flood, it gives you duration of flood for either hours or days, and then the estimated depth above the ground floor and above ground and then above the first floor. And so that gets factored in if you are doing an assessment from a flood. And then, yeah, so I haven't had any issues like this where I've gotten an error message or anything like that. So again, if you do, you might want to reach out to the building science or completely uninstall and reinstall it if you need to do that. But I have not had any issues, and I think it's pretty user friendly. So so yeah, structure type, if you click residential, it has a space for how many stories, and then the residence type, like single family residence, and then the foundation type, whether it has a basement or slab on grade, because all of that is going to be factored into the final numbers that you're getting. Like I said, the square footage calculator, so you'd have this with the base cost. If you're doing it this way, you'd leave the geographic information at 1.0. And so again, definitely recommend looking at the best practices and the user manual. It has all of this information in there. So you can click on the square footage calculator, it will open, and then you can enter what shape the structure is in. And then once you've done that, it will open up this window. So this is the square shaped one, or S shaped. And so it gives you number of stories here, and then the length and width here. And then it will calculate the square footage for you, and then factor in the base cost. Or you could just add it in manually. Yep, and then it'll say it was saved successfully. Like I said, leave cost adjustments unless there's specific information about that structure having like more expensive features on it, and then the geographic adjustment at 1. And then you don't really need to do any other additional adjustments or anything unless there's something unique about that structure. And then it'll give you the cost. So yep, that's the computed ACV. So this is the default. Again, you can just go to the cost tab, switch it over, and then put in the appraisal information or the contractor's estimate cost if you have that, or if you're requiring that from your property owners. Otherwise, again, this is the default. So yeah, depreciation is this rating. Again, this is from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So again, 1 is very poor, uninhabitable, dilapidated, and then 2 requires extensive repairs, 3 is some repairs, 4 is average, 5 above average, and then 6 is excellent, which is rare for that one. Or you can choose this number based on the judgment of like a professional in your community. Again, having a building official that has those qualifications is helpful if you're dealing with a disaster. So we were able to, or like in this example, have an average cost per square foot. So the base cost of new homes that were built and sold in Lyon County, since that's where our example was from, and we got that from the county appraiser. Or like I said, there are the industry standard guides that you can use, such as Marshall and Swift. So here is where they averaged the base cost based on the information from the county appraiser on the new sales in the county. And so once they have all these numbers, they averaged it out to get the base cost. And again, since this might be kind of subjective, is why you'd want to get all of the community officials on board with what this number is. If it needs to be updated periodically so that you're not using outdated information. So yeah, there's a lot to think about before a disaster happens. And so these are the cost estimation guides. So there's RS Means or Marshall and Swift, and I found this information online about Marshall and Swift, the handbook, through CoreLogic, which is a company that FEMA uses as well for doing insurance rating. So apparently they have it in software form now as well. It might be expensive. Your county appraiser might have either a copy of the handbook or software or something already available. So as I said, you're already probably going to want to have a relationship developed there. And that might be part of the set of procedures that you write out, is their involvement and contributions to doing assessments. So, and then percentages based on the actual damages and not including any cited violations of the code. And then, yeah, the user manual has lots of information about this. as far as what would be included and what to look for. So sorry, everyone's video is getting in my way. Okay. So sometimes it's obvious that something is substantially damaged, and then we don't really need to spend time doing a full assessment. If it's clearly more than 50%, then we can just move forward with getting that determination out. Or you could put it in the SD software and put, the things that are obviously damaged at 100%, to just have that documentation as far as the damage. Clearly less than 50, that should be obvious. Sometimes we still need to go and do the assessment, but again, we don't have to waste as much time doing a full assessment if it's obviously not substantially damaged. So then we can issue that determination, or at least put it in the software and get a report, and then do the determination, and then just making sure that they get a permit before they do the repairs. So most of the appeals are going to be between 40 and 70%, and that's where we need the greater precision, and that's why you categorize your most medium damaged structures to be assessed first. So yeah, this is where we need to probably generate the detailed reports and then be able to carefully go through each of those elements to make that determination of whether or not it's 50%. And then some property owners want to be substantially damaged so they can make an ICC claim if it's a flood and they had a policy. So again, if they are going to dispute that, you should have dispute resolution written into your administrative procedures about what information you'll accept. So detailed cost estimate from a licensed contractor, they could get an appraisal, or they could submit receipts to you. So you can accept information from a property owner as long as it's backed up by documentation, like receipts for construction materials and that kind of thing. So this is from our post-disaster manual. It's a sample worksheet. So we have that. Hopefully everyone here has the post-disaster manual. If you don't and you'd like a copy, let me know. It just is a short guide that we put together that goes over the rules, what to do after you've experienced a flood or a disaster, how to get started. It has sample outreach and press releases and stuff like that. So once you've entered all of the data, the output summary is a page here. It's one of the last tabs, and it puts together all of the information, your replacement cost, the computed damages, the depreciation, and the actual cash value. And then at the bottom is the percentage of damage. So you have 56.5%, so substantially damaged, and it says that, and your assessments will be red flagged if they're substantial. And then if it's less, they turn a green color, and it just kind of makes it easy to distinguish that. And so here's the basis for the value of the structure. So this is where you computed it with the base cost and the square footage. Again, you could require market appraisals, or if they submit that as part of a dispute, then you can switch it over and see how that impacts the assessment, or the adjusted tax assessed value from the appraiser's office based on property tax. So again, pick one and stick to it, and then maybe use the appraisal as your dispute resolution option, which I think is the most common. And then cost of repairs, we have the computed damages based on using the SDE software. Again, they could submit a contractor estimate or the community estimate if you have a qualified professional that works for your community that is able to do that based on professional judgment. Yep. So again, it just says to ensure consistency, make sure that you are picking one and sticking to it. And then the files and photos, again, we want to have at least 2 photos for every structure that we have to identify them. Most importantly, make sure that that data lines up with what we see in the photo as far as, number of stories, and mostly making sure it's the right property. And then they do say it can make your software slow if you have too many photos or if they're too large. So they recommend like 680 by 460 or something pixels. So all of that's in the best practices guide that I showed you. And again, this is what we'd want to see, like at least 2 different angles, have the property address or that temporary ID number in there so that we can make sure that we are evaluating the correct structure. So your inspection team should have a whiteboard and marker with them as they're going out and doing assessments. And then you can print the summary report like they're recommended to do in the video. It's very concise and it has all of that information in it. So it does have a little box here that you can enter any improvements or repair to previous damages that had happened in either the last calendar year or in the last 5 calendar years for the cumulative structures, if you have those adopted. And then here's the summary report. Again, it's very concise. It has the picture there, the structure information, the property owner, the map information, and then the damages. So this one doesn't have the actual element percentages marked in here, but the detailed report would. So I think this is sufficient to send with your letter of determination, and you can sign it. Again, it's very official looking and it has the percentage damaged. And then if you need to go and sit down with the property owner and go over those itemized damage parts, or go back in and redo the assessment with better information that they have provided, then you can do that. So again, if you don't save everything, I guess it can result in a blank report and lost data. I have not had this happen, but I have been hitting save a lot in between, just because I guess this can happen and this is not what you want to happen as you're trying to finish up your assessments. So some common questions. Again, code violations that were previously cited by an official don't count towards this threshold. All of that is covered in the desk reference. So definitely have that saved or have the link to it readily available. If you're dealing with finished basements, the damage to that would count towards the damage estimation because it was there before the disaster or the damage occurred. So it would be included in the total damage estimation. And of course, we're in Kansas and basements are pretty prevalent. And so there are definitely concerns if it's substantially damaged, then people having to fill in their basements and elevate their structures. So it's pretty pertinent here that we would consider the basement issue. And then of course, dispute resolution, having these alternative options for them to supply you with better data so that you might change the estimation, but having this documentation and reliable data to be able to justify doing that. And again, written administrative procedures, how you're going to do assessments, what data is going to be used. I don't know if you'd put the base cost in there, but you might. And then having dispute resolution, how people can dispute your determinations and get that changed. Okay. So here's our last poll question. I think we have time for me to do a short demonstration after this, and then we can take questions. So again, if you want credit, please answer the question, true or false, a determination from the community that a structure is substantially damaged is needed to make an increased cost of compliance or ICC claim on the flood insurance. So give you a few more seconds to answer that. All right, 5 more seconds. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll, share the results. So yes, that is true. You do have to have the substantial damage determination from the community to be able to make that claim. And definitely having the SDE reports will support that claim. So of course, any questions about doing damage estimations, or if you have any flooding or any disasters that would impact the floodplain, definitely let us know. We're happy to help, which may include us coming out to your community. So since we had a couple of minutes, I thought I would just kind of show you what I have in my SDE database. Again, this is the standalone and it's just called like training class, but like I said, it's pretty easy to use. I think it's pretty user friendly. So if I click on view search records, so these are all of my properties that I have in my imaginary floodplain. So it shows you the assessments that I've done. So these ones are not substantially damaged. The ones that are in red. So so when you click on it, you can view either just the property information. I could delete it, or I could just look at the assessment information. So this one is from the FEMA independent study course that I showed you. Again, definitely recommend that just to get a feel for using the software. So I can add all this information in about the community name, latitude and longitude. So all of this was given to me in the class. We're at Hazard Shores, Virginia, and so it does ask for the county and stuff. So having this information is in here is important for the software to work properly. So this is a residential structure. I think it was like 1 story. So the superstructure, you have stud framed, common brick, ICF, masonry. Residence type, so the single family town or row house, or the manufactured home here, like I said, is an option for either residential or non-residential use. If it's a manufactured home, this is what you'd want to use. Heating and cooling, the exterior finish, so you have these basic ones to choose from, which standard is usually just siding or stucco, the type of roof covering, and then, so like I said, cause of damage, this is flood, you have duration and these depth values. If you pick something else like fire, obviously you wouldn't have any depth information, but you have this, and then it would just go to the percentages. Same thing with the other. So if you have others, you can describe what that is. And then the NFIP information over here, map and base flood elevation stuff. And then the cost. So any adjustments that I want to add in here. The base cost in this example was $100. So again, that would be something you determine with your appraiser's office. And then it's easy enough to calculate the square footage. So this was a square shaped. They gave me 40 by 28 and 2 stories. So I just saved that. And it gives me the number and then the cost based on those 2 numbers. And then they had above average condition for the depreciation. And of course, they're using 1 for the geographic adjustments. And then of course, the percentage of each of those elements, and then the output summary. So if I click on appraisal, I would just be able to add that number in. Same thing for tax adjusted values. So again, whatever you're using, and then it'll give you this. So we looked at the summary report. Here's the detailed report. So like I said, it's a little bit longer, 5 pages. You have all of this information, and then it will show you all of the adjustments that I may have added in there. If this information was available from an appraisal. Oops, I just skipped a few pages, but this one includes the element percentages as well. So I just wanted to show you that. If I want to enter default data, so I can put all of these information in, that will pre-populate for new properties. So you can import SDE data from a different database or export it. You can import, so if I click this, I can put in my default values or select all. Okay, and then saved import stuff. So yeah, oops, I just closed the whole software, but we're about out of time anyways, so we have time for questions, but I just wanted to kind of give you a quick walkthrough of it. Like I said, it's mostly a matter of just getting acclimated to it, just getting familiar with it. So I'm just kind of looking at the chat to see if there have been any questions coming through.
Not seeing questions, but I did offer that if anyone's interested, that we can provide a list of those addresses in the floodplain so that you could do some work on pre-populating those in the tool. And then of course, Steve reached out and said that'd be great. So we can get that information over to you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. Yep. Okay, well, if you guys do think of anything, let me know for sure. I'm happy to send you anything that I talked about today, or answer any questions that you think of. If you do want the credit for the 2 CECs, send me an email request and I will make the certificate and send it to you. I don't do it automatically. So as long as you were here for most of the class and you answer the 2 poll questions, I can send you a certificate. And then if you could please participate in the survey that I want to send out. I would like to know how I could improve this. I wasn't sure if a more hands-on approach might work better, but I wasn't sure if that would work over Zoom. So any information that you could give me about that would be great. Awesome. Well, if there isn't anything else, I think we can just wrap it up there, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Okay. Thank you.